Mr. Case?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker?
Here. Please stand for the posting of the colors.
Left. Face. Man, permission to post colors. Post colors. Freeze, man. Arms. Order, arms, reverse colors, march. Center face. Right face. Mark time, march. Forward, march.
Thank you to our Wilson JROTC, impressive as always. Our first item tonight is under communications, presentation of National Merit Award recipients. We have Dr. Weber.
Thank you, everyone. Before I get started, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge someone in our audience here today who's celebrating his 50th birthday today, Robert Johnson Jr., our SRO. He's a huge part of our family, and he's the funny one of the morning wake-up crew out front, so I had to say something. So thank you guys for having us. We have the distinct honor and pleasure of acknowledging 8 total students tonight, and I'll ask them to join me when I call their name out. Every year, approximately 1.5 million students take the PSATs, and of those 1.5, 50,000 are acknowledged, or the top 3% that reach what's called commended status. Of that, about 16,000 move on to semifinalists, which is the top 1%. There's over 26,000 high schools in all of Pennsylvania, so if you do a little math, that means on average it's less than 2 kids per high school should be acknowledged. So the fact that we have 8 really speaks to the quality of students we have and the hard work that they put in. So I'm going to ask them to join me at this particular point. So Zachary Konzeman, he's a semifinalist. Owen Fick is for commendation. Aiden Hunter is for commendation. Amish Jindal is for commendation. Jack Peacock is a semifinalist. Siddharth Centaville is a semifinalist. Jody Sia is a semifinalist. And Claire Hinkle, who is unable to be here tonight, is up for commendation. So these are your 7 semifinalists and commended students. How about a round of applause? So the semifinalists will have an opportunity to move on to the finalist round. That is acknowledged later on in the year, usually in the spring. But all of them, when you think about these individuals are in the top 50,000 in the entire country, is pretty remarkable. So again, kudos to you guys for all that you've done. At this time, I'll open up to any questions from the board for these strapping young scholars here.
Yeah, I feel unqualified to ask you guys anything, so congratulations.
Yes. All right. With that, we're going to step outside for some pictures, but thank you guys so much.
Dr. Weber, just quickly here, to the students, I've had the privilege of watching many of you kind of grow up since middle school to high school, and I just want you to know how proud we are of you. And to the parents that are here, thank you. for raising such good young people.
Amen to that. While they're phenomenal students, they're even better kids, so we greatly appreciate that. So another round of applause for our finalists here. Thank you.
Congratulations again to all of the students for their hard work, making Wilson proud. Our second item of communications, Dr. Trickett.
Yes, thank you, President Cocker. If those of you that are here tonight that are recognized on this list, if you wouldn't mind just standing for me. So folks that are here that can see them, these folks represent some of our veteran support staff members. And support staff isn't the right name, unfortunately, for these folks. These are the folks that every single day, come here and are committed to making our school system better. Most of our employees in our school system are actually support staff employees. It's about 600 people strong, and the folks that are here tonight are being recognized for their commitment to this school district. And again, when I say that, I mean commitment to kids. So I do have a pin for those of you that are here. For those folks that are not on the agenda tonight, there are many more of these folks. Unfortunately, they were not able to make it. We'll make sure that they are recognized later this week by our team. So Christine Halls, 10 years. You can come up, Christine. Darlene Deasing, 15 years. Congratulations. You're welcome. Mary Jo Dunn. Congratulations. Come on, Mary Jo. Mary Ann Connor. Congratulations. Jay Geiswipe. Congratulations. Thank you. Audrey Hinkle. Sherry Alashewski. And Donna Taylor. Thank you. Yep, that was fine. 25 years. That's quite a commitment. Thank you.
Yes, Dr. Kennedy.
I would just like to say an extra special thank you. Many of the ladies over there, not only did I work with as a teacher, and I'm offended by that 25 years, just so you know, because I've been there since Mrs. Taylor was there. But they also worked with my child. And I had some of their children. And they're just such a wonderful part of the Wilson family, and I love running into them at the Special Olympics and seeing them, and they really are like family. And I can't imagine how our school would run without any of our support staff employees, from the bus drivers to our lunch ladies to the paras, and they add so much to our school every day, and they make it a family for both the staff, the teachers, everyone. And I'm very, very, very grateful, and I never felt bad about sending my child to school because of people like them. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Maravich, do you have an announcement? Okay. Then our third item for communication is the high school performing arts presentation. Dr. Trickett.
Thank you. Sean Dowdy will be joining me as well up on the podium. He'll be facilitating the majority of this conversation, but I'd like to kick it off. So if you could please jump into the first slide. So here's the agenda for this evening. Many of you have been at these presentations previously, where we've talked through the work that it takes, the amount of energy and collaboration that it takes to bring forth to this board and to our community strong, sound recommendations. We're here today really to address where we were, where we currently are, to talk a little bit about the timeline that we've created, that Sean and his team have created for us, the budgetary estimate, being that it's just that, it's an estimate. It's not a cost at this point. It's truly the best that the team can do, trying to forecast out with the construction timeline that's presented. Talking a little bit about the professional fees and how our architects are working with us to ensure that we're able to keep the constraints on those fees, and then engaging our board of directors in some conversation and discussion around what's proposed. So before I turn it over to Sean, I'd like to take everyone back in time, really 4 years ago from this time here. And this conversation around an auditorium, just to center ourselves, started well before 2018. Really, for the entire time I've been in the Wilson School District, we've been talking about what are we going to do with our auditorium. It's always been something that we knew had to be a priority. But in 2018, it really started to gain some steam. And at that particular time, we had a facilities meeting where the board considered 5 different options. And the team at the time, prior to me being in this role, I was the principal of the high school at the time, talked through those 5 options. And what was determined essentially is that there was a lot of needs around the organization. And the team decided that we needed to do a district-wide feasibility and really analyze the facilities at a larger level, down to the HVAC, electrical systems, bathrooms, everything on our site. So that took some time to do that. Different options were developed, which included the Performing Arts addition. And I'm going to work through these next pieces pretty quickly, but essentially during this time, we looked at all different options. We were considering what we believed to be the needs. We were engaging our different stakeholder groups, specifically our kids, some of our parent groups that were associated with using this facility heavily, and our staff. Meeting with our principals, with our teachers, some of them are here today. Matt Citrone, obviously, and his team, making sure that we had the right scope of this project moving forward. The scope of the project included connecting the schools. It included centralizing the offices. It included having a central location where kids and family members would come in and out of our school. Those were the needs that were developed that came out of work sessions that we had. And then as we were continuing, through this comprehensive addition and renovation project, obviously we were continuing to dialogue with our architects, our engineers, and our local municipalities. Fast forward, ultimately, we kind of honed in on a design, honed in on the scope that we thought was an appropriate scope. We put together the bids and the construction documents to go to bid, and we all know that those bids came in drastically over what we had estimated, even drastically over what our adjusted estimates, which continue to happen throughout this process, were projecting for us. So when that happened, we kind of took a break. And we caught our breath, and we're like, okay, we need to regroup here. Where is it that we need to go? So we re-engaged in this conversation just this summer and started to have these conversations. Okay, how can we drastically reduce the scope to get something across the finish line? We heard from our community. We heard from kids. We heard from our staff members that we need to do something. So we came back with a much reduced scope project that is going to eliminate quite a few things. I'll wrap the presentation at the end with a little bit of that, Mr. Dowdy. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to you to facilitate the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Thank you for having me again tonight. It's good to see you all. So to touch a little bit on the options that were initially studied at the outset of this whole endeavor, there were, as Dr. Trickett mentioned, 5 options, starting from kind of the options on both extremes. One was just to simply renovate the existing auditorium. Pretty straightforward, but doesn't really address the more important needs of the Performing Arts Department as a whole. The other extreme, of course, is an all-out addition, a new appendage to the building that houses all of it, and that is ultimately what got bid this past March. The 3 that were kind of in the middle, I'll show you here I'll call this one option one, is basically taking the existing auditorium, rotating it 60 degrees so that it's, and I apologize to those of you facing this screen, but it's rotating the existing auditorium 60 degrees and then adding an addition for the stage off of the one end. It also includes spaces for band and chorus. They were right up here. However, it does not include an orchestra space. And I'd also note that if you look at this box right here, that's what was the chorus space. It's to the far north of the plan, right next to the connector to the lower house. That's a pretty awkwardly proportioned space that I would suggest is not quite the most appropriate way to design a core room. And then comparing that to option two, which is to the right, that was basically demolishing everything between the classroom wing to the right and the existing gymnasium to the left and building everything anew. But otherwise getting you the same result as option one: auditorium, band and choral spaces, some LGIs are over there to the right where the current performing arts spaces are. Both of these options are right around a total impacted square footage, whether it be renovation or new construction, of around 75,000 square feet. They're pretty extensive projects. And I point that out because what you'll see in our design that we're presenting tonight, it is significantly reduced from that at right around 50,000 square feet. So it's something to keep in mind here. And then there was also an option three, which was basically to demolish the existing auditorium and simply put up a new auditorium in its place and not really addressing any of the other needs at all. And then basically you'd have the lobby, auditorium, and stage working south to north, and then some of the support spaces for the auditorium and the stage are off to the right. But I would also argue that this is not an ideal arrangement for stage storage, your stage and scenery shop, and dressing room, so on and so forth, that you really want to work with the stage and the auditorium in I guess, more immediate manner rather than down the hallway flanking the length of the auditorium. So that leads us to the design that was ultimately bid this past March, which, as I said earlier, was essentially an addition off to the west side of the gymnasium. So if you remember, we bid a project that has new auditorium and stage with supporting spaces for the stage right here, and then there's also scene shop and delivery area for the stage to the north end of it. Band, choral, and orchestra spaces immediately to the west. So that's the primary auditorium level. You actually enter up a level above that where we had the, if you recall, the new, administrative area and guidance suite at the 200 level, and that's roughly where you enter into the gymnasium. And same for the existing auditorium. It's all at the same level. The existing auditorium is getting renovated to new cafeteria with a brand new kitchen to the north of that. There's a little bit of addition area to support the new kitchen and food courts. A little bit of work related to the performing arts areas and some classroom space and faculty space at the lower house. And then also, which you can see here, also in the lower house, we had other work that was bid as alternates that ended up being the science labs, which were replacing the existing lower house auditorium. We bid as an alternate HVAC replacement, windows and shades replacement, and corridor painting all in the lower house. Those were needs that were identified at that time. At the 400 level, replacing or renovating the existing nurses suite to become an LGI space. So that is what was bid in March of '22. So when we reconvened in the summer, we got together and looked at the high school site as a whole, and we were thinking to ourselves, what spaces around or on the high school site could support an auditorium? And we literally brought printout of Google Earth, just like what you see here, and I brought 2-scale auditorium these. Made sure to have them today. We can move them around on the paper to see where could we fit an auditorium. What are all the options? And any option is on the table at this point, including an option, well, what if we took the, just inside the existing high school main entrance, the the administrative area and the media center. That's almost perfectly fitting an auditorium. Well, there's a lot that goes along with that, not to, the least of which is logistics for the high school, but then also, does it have the ability to support all the things that we've identified that need to go along with an auditorium, such as those stage, scenery shops, dressing rooms, so on and so forth. We ultimately landed on the space right in the courtyard between the classroom wing here and the existing gymnasium. And it seemed just about perfect. And a lot of the reason we liked it is because it doesn't get too involved with displacing existing parking spaces, which are crucial for how your site works, especially during events such as basketball games, auditorium events, so on and so forth. Furthermore, we can more easily deal with the stormwater that will be occurring with, we're adding more impervious surfaces for a new auditorium roof. So we will have to deal with it, but you have existing underground stormwater structures underneath the parking lot right now. And in the previous design, those systems basically had to get torn out and moved over, and that was pretty extensive work, which we're trying to minimize now. So this location in the courtyard, we found to be the ideal place to do all of those things. So I mentioned that the square footage for our new design is significantly reduced from not just what was bid before, but a lot of the options that were considered at the very outset. And the reason for that is we have a very targeted and focused scope for this project at this point. So what is that focused scope? It would be an auditorium with a minimum of 1,100 seating, an orchestra pit, fly loft with the rigging. We had previously bid 8 sets of electrified motorized rigging, and that would be included in this as well. Media production space, dressing and costume spaces, stage support, that's your stage scenery, stage storage, band, choral, orchestra spaces, music support spaces, so those are practice areas, the music offices, sheet music storage, toilets that are needed to accommodate the large assembly space that is the auditorium, mechanical and utility spaces, and one important factor is we're not shooting ourselves in the foot to allow for a future connection to the lower house. We know that that's important to you for the safety and security of your students, so anything that we do today will not inhibit your ability to make that connection in the future. So that was what the design does include. For clarity, what does it not include? It does not include, and this is largely in comparison to what was bid earlier this year. What it does not include is a new administrative suite, which had 6 administrative offices and conference space, new guidance suites, 11 offices and conference space, a new nurses suite, repurposed lower house spaces. Those include classrooms and the science labs and prep spaces, repurposed upper house spaces, such as the LGI, redeveloped music suite, dance room, black box theater, drama classroom, keyboarding classroom, that was part of the performing arts area, the consolidated cafeteria and kitchen, and then the lower house upgrades, including HVAC, window replacements, and then, like I said, it does not at this time include a connection of the upper and lower houses. But like I said, it's important to us that we enable that to happen in the future. So this is the layout that we are proposing to you tonight. One of the important things when we were laying this out was to make sure that the connections between a new lobby that is shared by the existing gymnasium and the new auditorium, that new lobby is clearly connected over to the existing building. And then furthermore, just to the north of this plan is where the existing auditorium is currently served by a loading dock. We're going to reuse that for, I guess, the efficiency of the design. So the avenue from there is very clear all the way down to the far end of the stage. So between there and the end of the stage is the stage shop. So everything is going directly to the stage shop or the stage itself. So what we have is the auditorium right here with orchestra pit, stage with fly loft. To the north of that is the stage shop. To the east of the stage is the dressing and costumes area, and just north of that is the media production space. And then if you kind of see a dashed line that forms that hexagon, that is the existing auditorium. And what we are doing is renovating that, so we'll be leveling it out and putting new walls inside that would contain the band, choral, and the orchestra. And we need to do a little bit of addition to the south end to accommodate that. And then the support spaces for those, which would include like band storage, orchestra storage, uniform storage, so on and so forth. And that's pretty crystal clear what the program is. Like I said, we would have the toilets to accommodate the auditorium. What I'm proposing is a little ticket booth that could accommodate both the gymnasium and the auditorium, and kind of tucking the toilets behind that so that they're right there, easily accessible, but yet still kind of tucked away a little bit so you're not just watching people go in and out during an event in the evening. To get the 1,100 minimum persons in the auditorium, we are proposing to go with a plan with a balcony, similar to what we did before. There are a lot of benefits to doing this, and pretty much all of them come back to keeping the cost as building this design as cost efficiently as possible. So by having a balcony, we can reduce the footprint of the auditorium as a whole, and that allows us to keep it pulled away from the existing classroom wing just to the south of it. That's really important because if we were to abut the new construction to the existing, we would have to underpin the entire stretch of the existing structure, and that is a very, very expensive undertaking to the tune of at least $1,500, probably pushing $2,000 per foot. And not only is it expensive, but it's also a kind of a daunting task to occur, which you would want to occur over the summer. And the reason for that is the existing classroom wing cannot be occupied while the underpinning process is underway, and that's for safety purposes. So that's a lot of underpinning to accomplish in a summer recess. So avoiding that is incredibly helpful, both from a time frame and cost standpoint. It also, the reduced footprint allows us to keep the corner from intersecting and overlapping the existing auditorium. And that could be helpful from a phasing standpoint if you elect to require that the existing auditorium stay functional while the new one is being built. And I'll talk about why you would elect or not elect to do that in a little bit. But either way, it is much simplified from a phasing standpoint or a structural standpoint. Having to overlap the new construction with the existing auditorium structure, which is a pre-engineered glue lam structure, I won't say is prohibitive, but it is cost prohibitive. So basically it keeps you from having to tackle a lot of structural challenges with overlapping them. We can also keep this east-west corridor that connects the existing classroom wing to the new lobby at its ideal 12 feet minimum. So one note I make regarding the balcony is it's not required by code to be accessible, provided that it does not exceed 1/3 of the main level seating capacity. So to put it simply, if we are targeting 900 people on the main level, we could have up to 300 persons at the balcony without requiring an elevator. It is important to us that in the event that you have students who are doing lighting controls or any controls that would be up in the upstairs control booth, those controls be able to be duplicated downstairs. So if you have any students requiring an accessible means to do that, it would be available. So we will be accommodating that. One other thing that I would note to you is while we're currently showing the access to the balcony outside of the auditorium, one thing we can look at for a security measure is see if we can work those stairways inside the auditorium so that you don't have students accessing it during the school day when you don't want them to, when they might not be so monitored. So that would allow you to close it off a little bit more securely. So that's something we can definitely look at as we get further into the design. I wanted to draw some comparisons to the existing spaces, as well as a couple notes about what was designed in the previous iteration. It was something that was asked of us last time we met. So this is the the band room. Currently, it's 2,885 square feet. The new band room on the right is 3,130 square feet. Now, you might ask, well, that's not significantly larger. Why is that? Well, the majority of the band instrument storage is in the band room right now. We are moving it outside, so there's an additional 1,365 square feet of band storage immediately adjacent. We can have direct access between the band room and the band storage. So that actually brings the total to 4,495 square feet, and that's where you really feel the improvement in the space. The core room, similarly, it is ultimately being significantly enlarged. Existing core room is 1,110 square feet, and we're proposing 2,190 square feet core room. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the previous design for the band room is pretty much right on par with what the new design is in this scheme. The core room is, or was, 2,140 square feet, and now it's 2,190. So we're pretty much right on the same pace with the previous design for that too. Orchestra, this is the interesting one because there is no actual dedicated orchestra space currently. They're using the stage for their rehearsals. And what does that leave you with? Approximately about 900 square feet of useful space for the orchestra room, or for the orchestra. They don't necessarily have dedicated instrument storage, but in a kind of makeshift fashion, they're using one of the practice rooms in the performing arts area, and that's probably about 300 square feet. It's not very much. What we're proposing is a 1,950 square foot orchestra space with an adjacent 660 square feet instrument storage as well. Previous design for the orchestra room was 1,950 square feet, so exactly the same with the connected 500 square foot storage. Auditorium lobby, currently it's about 3,320 square feet, and what we're proposing is quite a bit larger, 5,325 square foot lobby, noting that it does also support the gymnasium, which it's sharing its use for. In the design, as you see it right now, there is an additional 900 square feet of lobby balcony area. Again, that could change if we elect to move that inside the auditorium. The previous design, just for comparison purposes, it's about 5,800 square foot in the previous design, but it's not quite apples to to apples because that was also serving as the main corridor to the lower house in that design. So it was kind of dually serving a function there as well, but differently than this. So what could this look like? We put together a massing model to kind of illustrate the potential for how this might look. So what you see on the screen now is an aerial view with, of course, the gymnasium to the left and classroom wing to the right, and the little hexagon in the back there is the existing auditorium. What we're shooting for is kind of a more collegiate style atmosphere with a nice open entry area to the lobby in the foreground. Here's another view of it. This view is particularly important because it illustrates that space that's between the new construction and the existing classroom area. So not only does it, help us avoid a lot of extensive underpinning work, but it gives us an areaway that maintains all the windows to the classrooms there. And that's a really important aspect to this as well. That's not necessarily a actual monetary value, but it is certainly a practical value to you and your students. This is another look from ground level. This is as you would be coming down from the Grandview Boulevard access drive. So you'd have the classroom wing immediately to your right, and then the lobby for the new addition right there. Another one from kind of the lower side. Inside, again, we're shooting for a nice, open, airy feel with a lot of glazing. I point out that this is largely, with the exception of maybe a few classrooms in those little addition areas, this is largely the only glazing that would come along with this new addition. And that's important because that's a lot of money gets spent on window openings and fenestration, and by keeping that amount to a minimum will really help us in terms of maintaining our budget. So this is a look if you were to kind of turn the other way and look down toward the connecting corridor to the existing wing. The gymnasium would be on the left. This one's interesting because you can start to see there's a lot of wall space that would reveal itself, and this is perfect opportunity to push your brands for Wilson High School, Wilson Bulldogs, your Wilson Performing Arts Department. A lot of opportunities here. In fact, I was thinking on the drive out here, if you go back, there's even an opportunity with the glazing to the right, getting something on this wall that reveals itself, maybe pops out at nighttime, glows a little bit, would be really impactful. You could see it from outside without even coming in. This is standing at the other end of the auditorium. You can see the ticket booth at the end. Behind that would be where the access to the toilet rooms would be. And then you can see some of the gymnasium doors. Those gymnasium doors would actually be new doors brought out to the firewall that separates the new construction from the existing building. So make minor modifications to the entrance to the gymnasium. All sorts of opportunities there. We could do display cases, or if you have trophies, anything like that. We could do something. We'll find a way to use the very nice bulldog carpeting that you have in the lobby to the gymnasium right now. Find a way to reuse that if you like. A lot of opportunities there. And then here's kind of an overall view from high up. Again, this balcony access, we can work with you. If you prefer to tuck that inside the auditorium, we can work on that too. So schedule-wise, what can we accomplish in what time frame? So today is October 17th, and this is based on the school board pondering this for the next few weeks and making a decision on November 7th. Should you choose to do so, we would enter in the schematic design phase, followed by design development and construction documents, allocating about 3 months for each phase, and coming back to report to you kind of at the beginning or at the conclusion of every phase, getting your authorization to continue forward. We would project to be finished kind of in the mid to late summer period, late July, early August. And at that point, the board would have a decision to make, and we will work with you, help you through this decision-making process. Do you elect to bid it right then and there? Or maybe you might monitor the markets and see, if in fact we appear to be going into a recession period, that might be beneficial to wait it out and let that recession hit a little bit. And contractors might be really looking to get some projects into their system, maybe come the fall or winter time. So at your discretion, we could bid it right then and there, or you can shelve it for a few months. So what you see on the screen is, for the bidding period, I kind of hold a kind of checkered pattern out there all the way out into 2024, the January, February time period. Traditionally, we have found that the January, February time period to start the bid process has been favorable. So ignoring any potential market conditions, the January, February time period has been favorable because that's when contractors are looking to fill out their schedule for the following summer. So they're eager to get some jobs on their plate, and they often price in a competitive and beneficial manner to our clients. So a lot of options, and we'll work with you through that period and help guide you in selecting the most ideal time period to bid it as the markets reveal themselves when we get there. One note that I make is for the land development approvals, MPDES and the Berks County Conservation District, we have an open application with them, still pending from the previous project that was bid in March. We've just been continuously renewing that application. We will go back to them and submit to them an amended application, which would have the new design shown. To them, although we're renewing the application, a lot of aspects of that being a different design than what they currently have, it will feel a little bit like a new process. So we're holding a pretty extensive time period. We're showing from May through September for that approval. It may take that long, but it also may not. We have a pretty good relationship with them at this point. We believe it can be done quite a bit faster than that, but I'm holding that out there because we don't know until we meet with them the first time with the new plans. And then the last thing I note on here is, and we'll talk about this when we get into the budget, the construction duration. I'm figuring on a 20-month construction duration, and that's based on two-phase projects. So building out the new auditorium, and then after that's completed, going back, gutting the existing, and renovating the existing spaces. So assuming that you were to bid this right after the completion of the contract documents, I'm sorry, that doesn't add up. But if you hold on to the January, February, March timeframe to bid it, the substantial completion will be January 2026. So that's the last thing you have to keep in mind when you want to turn over the new auditorium and all the spaces. You might say that the winter 2025 concert programs are a really important target to hit, so that might impact your decision on when you choose to bid it as well. It also might impact how you elect to carry out or execute the project. Do you want it to be a two-phase project, which extends the construction duration, or if you can kind of take the rip the Band-Aid off approach, if it works with your logistics, turn over all the spaces right away to the contractor and have one clean phase where they're doing the new additions and renovating at the same time. That will reduce the construction duration probably by 2 to 3 months. So that can be beneficial to turning over the space. It also reduces the amount of time that the contractor is under contract with you. So there are monetary savings associated with that as well. But you have to think hard about if that kind of logistical approach will work with your high school. So as far as the budget for this design option, we set this budget up based on the numbers that came in March, because those are real numbers for a similar, not the same, but similar project containing and largely focused around an auditorium and performing arts spaces. So that project included some high-end spaces that are the auditorium and the lobby spaces around it. So those are real numbers that we have that we can use to help us build the budget this time around. Prior to that, we were basing everything off of the best that we could find based on what we're learning from RS Means, Farella, Market Watchers, and doing the best that we could. The inflation was going way beyond what we could reasonably estimate at that time. But now we have real numbers to associate this with, and then we can apply escalation factors to those real numbers that bring us not just to today, but then we'll apply, the escalation out to a theoretical bid period. So we're basing this budget on the project bidding immediately when the contract documents are prepared. So bidding it August, September next year. So with escalation factors that we're building in and those conscious decisions that we made to keep the design as structurally simple as possible, not abutting new construction to the existing classroom wing where we'd have to underpin. As an example, we're really trying to give ourselves the highest probability for this project coming in on budget. So our estimates today, while they are just estimates, we're trying to set this up so that, one, you can budget your money for other projects and other things that you're looking to accomplish as a school district, but two, have a reasonable budget for this project at the same time. So what does that look like? Here you can see where we established the design period. That's between now and when we bid it, so August next year. And then the construction period, again, assuming a two-phase construction of 20 months, that sets the midpoint of construction to 19 months from today. I will note that when I presented this to the Facilities Committee last week, I made a kind of last-minute decision. I was looking at the formula for that construction midpoint, and it was inaccurate, so I made that correction. It did have a $300,000 impact on the final the final concept estimate price, but for the sake of transparency, I wanted to point that out to you. So what we do is establish our square footages for the new construction and the existing building renovation, and assign dollars per square foot for general construction, HVAC, plumbing. Fire protection in the previous project was included in the plumbing, so that's all included in the plumbing construction costs, and then electrical. So again, these are numbers based on the previous project's bids that have come in, and then they include about an 8% escalation. That gets us to today. So those are the numbers that you see right now. So probably the most apparent is the general construction. And the reason for that is that general construction includes a lot of equipment. It includes auditorium seating, all of the auditorium rigging, lighting, all of that stuff that comes with the auditorium package that the theatrical team would provide. That's built into the general construction costs. So there's a lot of money included in there. I also make a point of noting that it includes what the cost per square footage price of a 30-year roof, and I know Mr. Simcox will appreciate that. So we're baking that into our pricing that you see right here. It is not in an alternate bid. We might make it an alternate bid just to get a price on it, but I'm including that in our budgetary estimate that you see tonight. Ordinarily, in our budget estimates that we prepare, we break out a lot of these things for auditorium seating, the rigging, stage equipment, so on and so forth. Because they were included in the contractor's bid prices on bid day on March 8th, which are what I previously showed you on the previous slide, I've zeroed them out here because they are already included. And then box 9 is the escalation factors, and this is where that midpoint in construction comes into play. This is the projected escalation at 4% per year between now and next year's bid period that we anticipate. We have been seeing a reduction in the inflation that has occurred over the past few months. I'm not saying things aren't still increasing or inflating, but the rate at which they are increasing is significantly lower. So that's where your escalation factor comes into play for that. And we are still holding a couple contingencies, estimating contingency and high-end feature space contingency. If you take them, put them all together, add it into the cost per square footage as before, it comes out to roughly, counting for all the disciplines, all the trades, roughly $400 per square foot for new construction. We have not seen numbers come in that ballpark yet. I feel confident in these numbers. However, again, these are just estimates based on what we know today. So, of course, things could happen. I often say to clients, can you tell me what the cost of gas is going to be 6 months from now? You might have a hunch, but you probably don't know exactly. This is what we know today to be our best impression of what we can give you for the cost. Box 11 is the soft costs. This includes essentially our professional fees. I skipped over box 10, that was not intentional. Box 10 includes soft costs related to construction, so there's a lot of construction contingencies, change orders happen, things come up, especially in a renovation project. Your testing and inspection, so on and so forth. These are all things that are related to the construction, but not what the contractor will show on their bid day. That is this number. That's your bid day number. So everything below that is related to construction, but to be accounted for your all-in costs, they're separated. Our professional fees, like Dr. Trickett mentioned, we're working with you to give you our best cost for this. This is essentially a new project. There is a lot we can carry over. There are details that we'll certainly be reusing. However, the building's integration and connection to the existing building is inherently different. So there will be things we have to do that make this a substantially different project than the one that was bid in March. That being said, we are working with Wilson School District to give you a cost that is the best value that we can give you. It is our best cost. We're reducing our cost from 6% to 4.75% of the final estimated cost of the work. Essentially what this means is that is a savings of about 21% to Wilson School District. So reduces your cost for professional fees by $257,000. And that reflects both our commitment to you, we appreciate our relationship with you, and also reflects things that we can carry over from the previous design. We don't have to do a full field survey. We probably have to look at a few things, again, because it's inherently working with the existing building a little differently, but we don't have to do all new staff interviews. We know what your staff wants, so we can start preparing those layouts for band corps or orchestra spaces right away, and all it would take is a meeting with them to say, do you like this? Something we should change. So details, so on and so forth, that all gets, as much as we possibly can, get carried over from the previous design. So that's the basic services. That includes ours as the architect, structural, mechanical, plumbing, and electrical. The additional services include the civil engineer. They have also committed to reduce pricing. You can see theirs on the left, that's at $85,145. If theirs was a brand-new project, sight unseen, this would probably be a $200-some-thousand cost. So significant reduction on their part, too. The acoustical consultant has also committed to a reduced cost because they, too, are aware of your goals for the auditorium as far as acoustic performance. So they've reduced their fee to $10,800. And previously, bear with me, previously they were at, I think, about $25,000 to $30,000 brand new, so significant reduction on their part. So they're at, I'm sorry, $19,500, so it's $10,500 for the design portion, and then a $9,000 for construction. They would come out and make sure everything's getting installed the way it should be for optimum acoustical performance. That's it.
So,
Questions?
thank you, Sean. Just quickly before the board has a conversation and dialogue here, just want to make sure everyone's clear on, there's 3 weeks between today and our next board meeting. There's nothing on the agenda tonight as far as an approval. We wanted to build this time in for us to have continued dialogue and conversation. This has been presented to our facilities committee previously, so this is the second time some folks are hearing this presentation. Just also want to remind people a couple of key points from my perspective that Sean identified. We're staying exceptionally focused. We're trying to focus in on what the needs are. We're trying to stay kind of guided by that compass. This is what we're here to do. We're not here to talk about courtyards and science rooms and all these other pieces. We're focusing on the performing arts. Significant reduction in scope, as was identified, but still, I believe, meeting the needs of our staff and most importantly, our kids from a performing arts standpoint.
Yeah.
Which is really where we started way before 2018.
Yeah.
So I just wanted that to frame the conversation before we turn it over to our board.
I think to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, I want to make a point in saying that what we are proposing here is a high-class performing arts addition and renovation project. What I was trying to, and I hope came through in that presentation, is outside factors we're trying to limit their impact on the budget, but what we can control and what we are building is going to be a very special space for Wilson School District, Wilson High School. We're not shortcutting anything inside the auditorium. I want to make that especially clear. So we're trying to deal with the outside factors and keep them from encroaching into this project and lay it out in a way that is efficient design and, cost impact. But everything inside, we're building it out to your needs and what you expect.
Thank you, Sean. So I know that you made a point to mention that it's not it's basically apples and oranges because we did take a lot out. We don't have the cafeteria, which I know it's kind of unfortunate, but we're going to work around. We don't have the fields included in this estimate, and as well as the admin wing. But just as a reminder, so the estimate right now is $22 million. What was our bid that came in for the previous project? Just so everybody has a gauge.
Yeah, so it kind of depends which alternates you select, if any. The base bid came in at about, let's say base bid plus unclassified construction, which we recommended at that time should you have proceeded to take, because that eliminates your liability should you encounter unsuitable soils come excavation time. Plus the 30-year roof warranty. That put it at $34,155,000 and change. That did not include the like the science labs and the HVAC in the lower house. and a lot of those other things. I think if I recall correctly, it came in around 42 if you added that all together.
Thank you. I just wanted so that in our discussion or questions, we have comparison kind of in our minds between what our previous project was and how far the scope has kind of been
Yes.
narrowed down. Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
I don't think what you said is correct. This project can't be, the $22 million does not compare to the $40 million. The question that I would be asking is, what was the cost to build the original auditorium, not the whole process? Because this process is fundamentally flawed, because all we're doing here is we're taking the big project now, cutting out the corridors, the safety corridors, which was one of the biggest pushes when this was originally designed. We got to have those corridors. All these board members said, we got to have it. They're not in there. What's the cost for that? We got to have if I remember meeting with the superintendent, the mechanicals are on the verge of collapsing. We got to get those mechanicals put in there. So you're not comparing apples and oranges. The cost, if we throw in the corridors, we throw in the fields, you throw in all the mechanicals, what would that number be?
It would be more.
Well, I realize.
I can't give you that number.
Well,
tonight, but
I can estimate it. It's going to be close to 35 million.
Mhm.
So I don't want the public being misled that just because this is only costing $22 million, it doesn't include a lot of things that were, quote, vital. Now they're not vital, like the corridors, save the corridors, they're not vital anymore.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, I do have a problem with that, because we're only presenting one piece. Are we going to do the fields or not do the fields?
Yeah.
Are we going to do the corridors or not do the corridors? I would like the board to make a decision. Are we going to do the corridors or not? But don't tell the people that we're saving all this money, because we're not, because we do the corridors and we do the mechanicals, which supposedly were very, very needed, and the fields, we're up to that number. So, okay, so I just want to clarify that so there's no misunderstanding.
Yeah, I was hopeful that the slide that indicates what it does not include addressed that, so it is known and apparent what the $22 million does and does not include.
But the average person can't equate that to dollars. I can, average person can't. Now, the other thing is, and don't take this, personally, because you're only the presenter, when you say we're saving all this money from the 6% to 4.75, you even acknowledge that we can use, X amount, all this, we don't have to go back, but that 6%, I've never done a project and approved the 6% architectural fee, never. That's kind of like, well, I saw the list price, so I do have an issue saying we're saving all this money, because I've never, and I've done a lot, never paid 6% for architectural fees. And the only other thing I had a question for you is, I agree 100% that through recession, if you've done a lot of work with the prices drastically, it becomes a dog fight, cat fight, whatever you call it. So there could be substantial savings in that arena. And that's all I have right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, thank you, by the way. This is a great design, very elegant, doesn't seem forced this time around. I think we were forcing something the last time. It's a great use of space. It's I wouldn't say it was wasted space before, but it's a great use of space to expand our school and the footprint of our school. I'd like you to talk a little bit about the classroom space that we will then get, that's going to be then abandoned as the orchestra and choral classrooms move into the new space. And then also, Dr. Trickett, if you want to talk a little bit about the meetings that you had with law enforcement, the task forces, with coming up with different options and creative situations to not have a corridor, and it wasn't such a safety concern after all. So, thanks.
Sure, thank you. Yes, that's an excellent point. What this project inherently does is it opens up the area that the Performing Arts Department is currently in for reuse. That is not part of this project, the renovation of that. I think the school district would like to go through a process of deciding what is the best and highest use for that space in the future. But that could be absolutely a separate project, whether it's an LGI or some other classroom spaces that are needed by the high school. But that is space that will become available. And then also, as I noted in the presentation, the orchestra space does not have their own space right now, and this provides that for them too.
I can add on to that too a little, Sean. So I think what's important for our community and everyone to understand, our board, is that while there's not necessarily what we think of as new classrooms being added, there's not a science classroom this time or an English classroom, we are adding a chorus, an orchestra, and a band classroom. That's the place where these kids go every single day to learn, just like we do perhaps algebra. So those are all new spaces, thus vacating their current spaces, which we don't currently have an orchestra space, but we're vacating the auditorium stage, which is another option now for us to no longer bring forth a black box and to utilize that perhaps more with our theater program. So we're vacating not just classrooms, but very large classrooms, as Sean pointed out. Tons of storage in that space is being vacated as well. There's other organizational efficiencies that are created perhaps, and we don't know yet till we're further in the study, around what about our digital music program? Can we kind of repurpose where that's currently located? We currently use an entire classroom to store costumes and costume-type products, for our different events. We will be vacating that. So I would say that if the board would so choose to authorize this project, we will be creating at least another 5 classrooms. The scope of that work to renovate those spaces is not, however, included in this estimate. On the second piece around security and safety, obviously that's our top priority, right? We need to ensure that, to the best of our ability, the kids and our staff and our community is safe. Through the work that we've done in analyzing our student schedule, our high school schedule is exceptionally open. So much so that many of our juniors and seniors have options. We have 200 kids every day that leave our school for just our internship program. That doesn't include the kids that are doing dual enrollment or work-study programs. It doesn't include kids that, for lots of reasons, don't have to be here for the entire day due to open campus. So we have hundreds of kids leaving our campus and coming to our campus every day. Add to that the number of kids we have moving. So what we did this year is we added 2 additional full-time security guards to our campus. We have 5 security guards covering our high school campus with a specific focus not only the halls during this instructional day, but also being outside and being present. So that is our current strategy, knowing that in a school of our size, nearly 2,100 kids in our high school, larger than most school districts in Berks County. There's the number of kids that go to school every day in our high school. We feel as a team that right now this project is well-focused. It also leaves over 20, if it would come in at this on bid day, would leave over $20 million in our current bond, the borrowing that we already secured, to allow our board and for our leadership team to talk about those next pieces. I don't want to call it phase 1 and phase 2, but there's money there for us to have additional conversations, whether they're parallel to this or after this. So what Sean presented today is what we are recommending at some point to commit partnering with them on. That doesn't mean that with our team here, including Jeff and others, that there's not going to be other things that are presented at some point.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Mr. Negrini?
Yeah, I just want to know, is this working? I don't think so. Hello? Oh, okay. Now I can hear it. I can hear the echo. I guess I'm a little dismayed at this whole process. And I'm going to start back when the board decided not to proceed further. I was in a meeting in June when we were talking about, it was a facilities meeting in June, and I left there pretty, thoughtful that the committee was going to listen to the public, try to scale back on the cost of things. And even Chris at the end said, do you think the public would, sell for $10, $12 million in renovations? I said, that's a no-brainer. They would definitely do that. Then that was June. Nothing happened in July. Then in August, we get an email saying that we're adding a new probability to the list. We're now looking at building a new auditorium. That's the first time I heard of it, and that transpired in August. And then last week, we had the same presentation. That kind of bothers me. I don't like that type of approach. And it seems like something happened from June to August, which I was not part of, or I'm not sure many board members were part of. Also, that was when the corridors were eliminated. And that thing really bothers me, because when we started talking about the corridors 4 or 5 years ago, I said, there are other ways of providing safety, but no, we can't do that, we got to build those corridors. So now we're saying there's other ways. So this is some of the stuff that bothers me in education. You go with the flow, and I'm a little disappointed, like I said, I'm a little disappointed. Do we need the auditorium? Certainly. No question about that. There's never been a question, but the process is flawed, how we do these. And I don't think we're very transparent at times, not so much, when we do our board meetings, but things like this bothers me when all of a sudden we're going to build a new auditorium, and I knew nothing about it until August. Now, I'm not addressing that to you, John, I don't mean it to be you, but I get frustrated, and sometimes I think we just forget that there's more in the world than just educators making decisions. There's got to be a point where there's some common sense. And common sense says that there's more people out there that should be included. We always talk about inclusivity, but we sit around and make 3 or 4 people make a decision, this is what we're going to do. So, and like I said, I've been involved in this since 2014, when it was originally discussed. And like I said, anyway, that's all I got tonight. Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your concerns, Mr. Martin. I would like to mention that there was a meeting between the June facilities meeting and our current discussion where Mr. Case, head of facilities, myself, head of extracurricular, I believe the invitation was extended to the co-chairs for both. We did walk with Sean and a group of administrators around the campus to kind of check out the different locations that Sean had the little pieces of paper and we kind of laid them on the map. And then we went to the physical spot to see which location felt like it was a better fit. And we landed with the current proposal. And it was an extensive discussion, and I think we, from the representative committees and the administration, felt comfortable with that direction. So just, if it felt like something was missing in between, I think that was probably the meeting that you're discussing.
Well, how many board members are at that meeting?
2,
Okay.
Mr. Case and
So
myself.
that's not a very inclusive group, but, and I'm not offensive, I'm not saying that negatively, I'm just saying, then that email came out in August. So what happened between June and August that made this thing happen? There had to be conversations between June and August. And I understand, I saw that email, I was away, I was in Florida. It doesn't matter where I was doing, but I was away. I get that. But I would have been appreciated to say, hey, Mike, guess what? We're not sure that these other items are going to work. The original plans aren't going to work. We were going to dust off those plans, and that's what was said in the June meeting. We're going to dust off those plans and see if we can lower the cost. Great. Like I said, I left very happy and excited that the administrator was going to take a look at trying to save some money. And we're saying we're saving money, but we're really not, but that's another story. So what I'm saying is something happened, the wheels were churning from June to that August, and a lot happened that I knew nothing about. That's all.
So Mike, if I could add some color to that. What wound up happening for the last 3 years, this board has probably had 20 to 25 options between schools and auditoriums and fields. We got nothing done. We wasted time, inflation happened, we got nothing done. So I proposed that, hey, why don't we walk the school, and I'm sure this was a couple of other people's ideas as well. Let's focus Crabtree to just an option or two and present it to the board. And that's basically what we did. We took a look at options. Hey, this isn't going to work. Let's not even waste our time on it. Or this isn't going to work. Let's not waste our time. If you think this has been a waste of time and this is not a great design, you have a voice on this board, and you're letting that voice happen. So we're trying to get something done here, and we have a proposal here in a design that now we're going to socialize with the board and the community, and then we can vote on this
But don't you
to see if
think-
we can go forward in the next couple of weeks.
You personally said that other option's not valid. How do we know? How does the board know?
You have a voice. If you have another option, please present it.
At the June meeting, we had an option to go back and look at the options. All I'm saying is something happened between there and then, and move
Yeah,
on.
I-
We have
I-
other business to do tonight.
Yes. So, Mr. Negrini, thank you for your patience. Would you like to have a question or comment?
Sure, just a few comments, obviously, to piggyback on what Dr. Trickett mentioned. This board approved borrowing of money for projects that are needed on this campus. And certainly, the auditorium was a significant part of what this board believed was a need for the district and for the community. So ultimately, it's about scope. It's about what fits our needs and our budget, along with other projects, as Dr. Trickett mentioned. Secondly, this is something that has been discussed when I was here at Wilson, and when it was only 10, 11, and 12, and the graduating class size was half of what it is now. But yet that space down in the band, chorus, and orchestra room hasn't grown, but the number of students have. And certainly from a learning standpoint, knowing what orchestra has to deal with on a daily basis, where they're setting up and breaking down instruments and what is needed for those classes, it shortens their learning time significantly. And I know that this was addressed by a board in the 90s, when ultimately the gymnasium was what was decided upon, as opposed to renovating or building a new auditorium space. So I think, the community recognizes that this is long overdue to be addressed. That being said, in terms of recommendations being made by administration, and ultimately what was discussed at our last facilities meeting, is recognizing that the existing space for those classroom settings needed to be expanded. That is what's being done here with this proposal. And I think, if my memory serves me correctly from last week, what we heard from administration as to why simply just taking the existing space and renovating without any further additions just doesn't work anymore for the Wilson School District in 2022 or 2024, as it perhaps barely worked in the mid-90s. So I understand your concerns, Mr. Martin. There are certainly valid concerns in terms of ways that we could find other savings, and perhaps, ultimately, some of those intermediate discussions could have happened prior to our facilities meeting. But nonetheless, what we need to look at in the next couple of weeks is whether or not, based upon what we see here and what we want to prioritize as a district, this particular project is something that is a priority or not, and will set the district up for the long term with our arts and music program moving forward. It's been long overdue. Athletics have certainly benefited time and time again. I mentioned about the last time we had a capital campaign project for the Auditorium and for Mack Field and Gursky Stadium, that we would want to do the same thing moving forward. And I imagine that we're going to have a significant amount of support and private donations moving forward with this project. Not that we are banking on that, but it is something that I think many people will get behind financially to see this to the finish line. So that being said, recognizing that $22 million is still a significant amount of money. I wonder what that cost would have been back in the 90s, when perhaps this should have been done, but hindsight is 20/20. And then we can look at the next proposal that comes out of our committee meetings and say, do we want to prioritize fields? Do we want to prioritize renovating over at Southern, do we recognize that we have a potential new building to be constructed, and make those decisions at that point. But, I've, been a big proponent of getting this done fiscally in a responsible way, but still recognizing that this is long overdue. And I'm glad that, we have some other options based upon what we had previously been shown when we rejected these bids. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would
Mr.
just,
Greenie.
sorry.
Yep, no.
I would just add, there's a lot to like in this proposal today. I think the balcony is a great idea. I think leaving the option open to connect the two buildings is a great aspect of this proposal too for future discussion. Just so I can understand that space between the two buildings that we're leaving open, what exactly is that? Is that like grass? Is that cement? Like, what do you envision that
Thanks for
as?
asking, that's a good question. What that space is, it's exterior space. In part, it would be a concrete walkway. We need that space, and I'm going to see how quickly I can move backward on this. We need that space for egress out of the auditorium.
Okay.
In addition to egress from the existing building further back, right through here. So what you see here, that's a little retaining wall. The elevation, the floor level of the auditorium is going to be lower than the grade that is right there right now. So we are going to have to retain it a little bit to be able to get a walkway through there and safely get people out. What we will ultimately do is probably a decorative fence or something that's egress only, so that prevents people from intruding into it, but it allows safe egress out of it. And then there is an opportunity to develop an outdoor classroom back there. Since we have to do the retaining wall anyhow, that's something that we'll probably do. So that's what that would be.
Okay,
So you can see egress doors here. They're going to have to find a way out safely.
sure. Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
I would just like to say thank you, Sean, for the presentation tonight. And while I echoing Mr. Negrini and Mr. Martin and, some of the other cost statements, I think it's very nice to see so many of the add-ons that we had to remove be put back in. Again, to echo Mr. Negrini, the performing arts has just been neglected for too long, and I'm glad to see us taking an approach to try and remedy that.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. Mrs. Lupe?
I just had a question of clarification. Are we going to be voting on just the one timeline? Or is there like a peel the Band-Aid off kind of timeline?
Yeah, great question. So what we'll do in not this week's update, but the next update is we'll articulate exactly what that is. Essentially, there'll be those 3 or 4 decision points as Sean outlined. Each time you'll be authorizing the next process in the phase. So what you'll see on the agenda, assuming that we move forward here, is an addendum to our current agreement, which is actually was proactively already in the works being developed. So you'll be approving 3-month intervals, John, correct me if I'm wrong here, basically beginning 3 weeks from now, and then up until as far as we get, including the bid process. So it'd be 4 decision points.
Yeah, and to add further to that, the November, I think it's 7th board meeting, that would be authorizing the contract addendum and the authorizing us to proceed with schematic design.
And I think it's important in terms of making that decision whether or not we're going to have the rip off the Band-Aid project or whether we're going to phase this in, is understanding from administration, from the folks in the music and theater program, what it would look like realistically if we would be without an auditorium. Each of those kids that work every day in the arts and music program deserve an opportunity to have those performances. That could be a senior year for a number of students that have worked hard in those programs. So for me, as a parent, as well as a board member, I'd want to know what that would look like if we decided to move forward and shorten that project by 3 months.
Yeah. And that doesn't necessarily have to be decided by November 7th. We will work through that with you over the coming months to find the best approach as far as how to phase it out as we lead up to the bid period. So that's not a decision that's, urgent, but something to keep in mind. Thank you, Mr. Negrini.
I just have one final comment. This whole auditorium started, Jay and I first were involved in this. We were the first ones that said we have to do something to this auditorium. And we originally budgeted, I think, $2.2 million for renovations 8 years ago. I don't know the timeline. But I don't want you personally thinking I'm against the project, because I'm not. I'm just not really happy with the way we come around with the processes, because I do agree that it's long overdue, but I still have a problem accepting the process. So I didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Any other questions or comments for Sean? Okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you all.
much for your time tonight and your time on the project. As there are no votable items for tonight's, because there are a couple public participation comments about the renovation, but we are not voting. There will be no action tonight on that. It is not considered an agenda item, so we have no agenda items for public participation, but they will be taken care of at the end of the meeting. This evening, the board did meet in executive session to discuss personnel matters. 2.1, requesting to approve the minutes from the board meeting held on October 3rd, 2022. Looking for a motion for 2.1.
So moved.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Treasurer's report, Mr. Martin?
Yes, Mr. President, I submit tonight the Treasury report, excuse me, the general fund investment reports, excuse me, sorry, the general fund balance sheet, the board summaries, reserve funds, and the construction funds as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. We have a motion for 3.1. Do we have a second? Mr. Negrini, thank you. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
4.1, payment of bills. Mr. Negrini?
Motion to approve the following bills from the general fund, $1,550,963.19. From capital reserve, $63,819.02. From the 2019A construction fund, $19,651.06. And from the 2021C construction fund, $1,745 as attached.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. We have a motion for 4.1. Do we have a second?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Abstain.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 abstain, 0 no.
Thank you. Financial reports, Mr. Negrini?
Motion to approve the financial reports for the month of September 2022 as presented, the cafeteria, childcare, and activity accounts from Southern, West, and the senior high school as attached.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. We have a motion for 5.1. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Abstain.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 abstain, 0 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Trickett.
Thank you, President Cocker. Tonight I present the superintendent's report, inclusive of personnel and program recommendations. The only additional item I have to add is it's nice to see some substitute teachers continuing to come back as retirees to be part of our system. So, welcome back.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Looking for a motion to approve superintendent's report, items 6.1 through 6.8 as presented.
Kennedy?
Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Do we have a second?
Case, second.
Mr. Case, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
7.1, request approval of the following field trips. Permission to approve the high school boys soccer team traveling to Pittsburgh. Request permission to approve the high school girls volleyball team traveling to State College. Request permission to approve the high school boys and girls water polo teams traveling to Erie, PA. Looking for a motion for 7.1.
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider?
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any discussion?
Well, to vote on these before they happen, so I realize sometimes it, falls through the cracks, so we're just covering our bases, but it would be moving forward in everyone's best interest to vote on these before they actually occur. Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Consent items, 8.1, request to accept with gratitude the following donations: to Whitfield from the United Methodist Church, school supplies; from Giant Food Store, school supplies; from Glad Tidings, $100 gift card; from Reading IMAX, popcorn for movie night; from Whitfield WHSA, 58 copies of the book We're All Wonders to the staff at Whitfield Elementary School in the amount of $513.30. 8.2, request approval to accept a 2022 Live Healthy Student Grant check in the amount of $1,000 from Capital Blue Cross to be used to support Wilson's program to educate students about the value of lifelong physical activity and healthy eating. Looking for a motion for consent items 8.1 and 8.2.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider?
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under Human Resources, request for approval of transportation retention bonus and support staff longevity, as attached. Looking for a motion for 9.1. Mr. McCray, thank you. Do we have a second? Mr. Hart, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. McCray? Yes. Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Student Services, 10.1, request permission to renew the contract with Talk Schools for one special education student for 2022-23 school year at a cost of $86,093 for the school year beginning 8/24/22 and ending 6/2/2023. 10.2, request permission to contract with Aviana Healthcare to provide healthcare services for the 2022-23 school year beginning October 17th, 2022 and ending June 30th, 2023 as presented. 10.3, request approval of a service agreement with Maxim Healthcare Staffing Services, Inc. to provide healthcare services for the 2022-23 school year, beginning August 1st, 2022, and ending July 31st, 2023, as presented, pending solicitor review. 10.4, request approval of an agreement between Wilson School District and Governor Mifflin School District to educate one special education student with autistic support services, related services, and ESY, for a total of $63,110 for the remainder of the 2022-23 school year, inclusive of ESY 2023. Governor Mifflin will be billed on a quarterly basis. Item 10.5, request approval of a resolution approving and adopting a student discipline waiver and consent agreement dated October 12th, 2022. 10.6, looking for a motion to approve a resolution approving and adopting a student discipline waiver and consent agreement dated October 13th, 2022. Looking for a motion to approve student services items 10.1 through 10.6.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Martin?
Yes, on 10.1, you'll see there, it was, the cost to educate this one student is $86,000 a year. That's 6 times plus the cost to educate the average Wilson student. And the problem with that is the taxpayers are funding this, not the state. So we always talk about ways of helping, our taxpayers. This is one area where we could all, I think, join hands and say to the state, it's time to start paying your fair share, because it's not fair to be taxing the local taxpayers for this type of a situation when it should be the state's responsibility. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other discussion?
Well, just what Mr. Martin indicated, as Mr. Martin's been part of the Finance Committee for a number of years, passed a lot of budgets, you see the flat level funding towards special education from the state and federal government, yet we are legally obligated to provide these services. And so, yes, Mr. Martin is absolutely correct, that the state and federal government are not pulling their weight when it comes to these escalating costs. And certainly at a district like ours, where you see certainly that there are districts that are sending students and paying the district here for special education services. Certainly, folks, when they're choosing districts and where their children are going to go, certainly, it's going to result in some additions and increases to our special education budget. So I would love for Mr. Martin to perhaps spearhead, a group from Berks County, board members and taxpayers alike, to say, let's do more than join hands. Let's have some conversations with our elected officials. I know when we had conversations many years ago with the former state senator Mike Fulmer, who was on the education committee at the time, he was floored to learn at what some of these costs are to the local taxpayer and school districts. And that's a person who was serving on the education committee, in Harrisburg. So I think, to have educational and informative sessions with our elected officials when it comes to that would be helpful. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Dr. Kennedy?
I just want to caution us, I agree 100% that the state and the federal government needs to fully fund public education. However, we have to be sensitive to the fact that we are not saying that these students don't deserve to be educated. We're not saying that they're too expensive. We're not saying that we don't want them in our district. Our lives are better and richer, and we should be proud of our special education. That's why people move here, so that we don't make our special education students, their parents, and the staff and faculty here feel like they're a burden on the district. That's absolutely not what we're saying. We're just saying that in many ways, including and especially special education, that we would like our federal and state government to commit to fully funding public education.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Under Operations, 11.1, request permission to contract with Home Care Solutions for custodial services for the time period September 13th, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. 11.2, request permission to enter into a 9-month agreement with Brightly Software, Inc. for software programs for Event Manager in the amount of $13,687.90, and Energy Manager in the amount of $3,125.50, pending solicitor review. 11.3, request permission to contract with Spire for rigging inspection at all 3 district auditoriums at a cost of $6,199.40, pending solicitor review. 11.4, request permission to contract with Sportsfield Specialties installation of safety netting at Bulldog Field at a cost of $12,571 under a KPN contract, pending solicitor review. 11.5, request permission to contract with Just in Time Colorado Time Systems for a new scoreboard at a cost of $58,207, pending solicitor review. 11.6, request permission to upgrade lighting and add additional lighting to the outside of Whitfield Elementary School with Dolphin Electric under CoStars in the amount of $45,500. And 11.7, request permission to contract with Stratix Systems for a replacement RICO unit for the print shop. Looking for a motion to approve operation items 11.1 through 11.7.
So moved. Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second?
Negrini, second.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of comments. I was going to talk about it at the facilities part of my report out, so I'll just talk about it now. With regard to the Brightly software for the, that was 2 contracts existing that is now an umbrella contract at a savings of 24%, which is great. And then want to thank Jeff Simcox and his team for the MAC netting. If everyone remembers, we had an original price tag of $42,000, and Jeff and the team worked with other suppliers, and they got down to $12,500. And the netting meets or exceeds PIAA standards. So it's a great win for Wilson. And it's kind of a testament to all of us working together and kind of being the checks and balances to each other to make sure that we're, doing the right things for the district, being safe and being fiscally responsible. With regard to the Whitfield lighting, that's the lighting in the back, and that's a safety. We talk about safety quite a bit. It's a major safety concern that we are lighting. The Auditorium scoreboard, that was, I believe, in next year's budget, and that is being pulled ahead. So that was part of our plan anyway. We're just doing it ahead of time because the scoreboard needs some help. The stage rigging inspections, that's just for the community. That needs to be done every 3 years. So for Southern West and the high school, that's where that cost comes from. That needs to be inspected every 3 years. And then with regard to Stratix, the print shop, the printer, it's a larger printer, and it's going to be a long-term savings because currently our black and white copies are .0073 cents or .0073 cents per copy, and now it's going to be .0042. So it's nearly 50% savings for black and white copies. So these are some of the things that were talked about at the facilities committee meeting, which is now brought forth to the board. So I just wanted to share some of the background. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, request approval of the transfer of the remaining balance from Caring for Kids Club of $383.90 to student government and inactivate the Caring for Kids Club account. 12.2, in accordance with Governmental Accounting Standards Board Statement Number 54, the board approves the transfer of $3 million to the Capital Reserve Fund as of June 30th, 2022, and commits the remaining excess of revenues over expenditures from fiscal year 2021-22 in the general fund for enrollment expansion. 12.3, request to authorize the chief financial officer to sign an electricity supplier contract for the energy component of the electricity price for the district for the 2023-24 to 2025-26 fiscal years upon secured pricing not to exceed 75 cents per kilowatt hour as provided by Provident Energy. 12.4, request approval of the Act 57 of 2022 resolution as presented. 12.5, request approval of the budget transfers dated July 1st, 2022 through October 12th, 2022 as attached. Looking for a motion to approve finance items 12.1 through 12.5.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes?
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
13.1, under Transportation, request the approval of bus routes and stops for the school year 2022-23, subject to administrative change throughout the year as needed. Looking for a motion for 13.1.
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Childcare, 14.1, as funded by the Workforce Support Grant in the category of Marketing and Advertising, Lamar has designed, oh, I'm sorry, that's too much, that's description. Simply looking for a motion, I can give the extra information if you really want to. Just looking for a motion to approve the contract with Lamar for electronic billboard advertising for childcare staffing pending solicitor review, $6,000 to be paid by the Workforce Support Grant. Looking for a motion for 14.1.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Dr. Kennedy, second. Any discussion? Okay, so it is funded by the Workforce Support Grant in the category of Marketing and Advertising. Lamar has designed an electronic billboard to be displayed in 3 local areas to advertise the need for staffing at our school-age centers. The boards will run for 2 months at all 3 locations. We have a motion and a second. Hearing no other discussion, roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider? Mr.
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under miscellaneous, we have our enrollment report as of 10/14/22. We have 6,383, which is a decrease of 2 students from the previous report of September 19th, 2022. And on to committee reports, BCTC, Mrs. Casper.
Yes, thank you, President Cocker. I do not have a report for BCTC. Our next meeting is at the East Campus on October the 26th, and I can move on to my report for Student Services.
That would be great.
We met on Wednesday, October 12th, and under Nursing and Health Services, tonight we approved an additional service agreement with Aviana Health Services to supplement our contracted building nurses. I know it's been challenging to not only fill our nursing positions with qualified nurses, but to retain them competitively. So I want to thank our administration on being proactive about this and securing additional resources to fill and sustain this vital role in our district. Under mental health and counseling, we received an update on the revision of Policy 819, suicide prevention. The policy is still completing revisions for its first reading, and it's in its draft form in the board docs. Its first reading is anticipated for sometime in November. Individuals interested but who may have missed the first in our series of mental health nights titled Building Your Child's Confidence are welcome to view the video archived, I believe, off the website. I'm not sure exactly where it's at. The next mental health night will be offered on October 19th at 7 p.m., and that is titled Protecting Your Child on Social Media. Individuals can register using the Parent Workshop portal. Under equity and student experience, a communication was sent out earlier this week regarding a survey for school culture, school climate. The survey data will be collected from 6 different groups, including parents, students, and staff, and community residents who do not have students attending the district can also find the link for the survey on the website, correct? Yeah. We talked during our meeting in some detail around sort of rethinking mental health and how it looks in schools. And this was as a result of some of our administrators attending a mental health summit recently. So we talked a lot about developing something like a district-level threat assessment team to respond to students in crisis, as well as partnering with some of our own student-run organizations dedicated to issues around mental health. So lots to talk about around mental health right now. So that's my report.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. BCIU, Dr. Kennedy?
Neither the BCIU nor the curriculum committee have met since our last meeting, so I have no report.
Thank you. Berks EIT, Mrs. Schlossman? Thank you. Extracurricular committee, so we met as a joint committee with facilities last Monday at 4:30 in this room, and a lot of times when we have our extracurricular committee meetings, there are a lot of items, and luckily we have Mr. Simcox there, because there are a lot of items that also relate to facilities. So I think it went really well. I think it was a good discussion from both angles. And I think possibly in the future, if we have an extracurricular committee agenda that is also heavy in facilities, it wouldn't, hurt to have more joint committee meetings and saves their administration some time as well. So I'll leave that to Mr. Case, who has the next report, to fill in any details.
I don't know if we saved anyone any time. That meeting was long. Yeah, so I provided an update already. We talked a lot about we had the presentation from Crabtree, which was supposed to be a half hour, 1 hour and 15 minutes. The first time it was an hour and a half today. So we have spent a lot of time talking about that. Some of the things that were on our agenda tonight I already discussed. And then with regard to extracurricular, some of the things that we just discussed, chlorine room, there was a refurbished system with the Auditorium, which was an acid process, which is now a CO2 process, which is much more efficient and less chemicals and just better for the environment, which was a big highlight from extracurriculars. Also, we talked about the baseball scoreboard at West that is now fixed, and some other notes that came up were just starting the discussion about under the bleachers in Gursky, looking at protecting the band equipment and some of the things that are there. Some of the community members have reached out to me and asked about that. Jeff and I walked that area during a football game and just started the conversation. Nothing's happening right now, just we want to kind of start thinking about considering the potential for enclosing some of that space to make things weatherproof. That space is used during football games, and people are getting rained on, food's getting rained on. It's a nice space that potentially be covered and weatherproofed for not a whole lot of money. And then one of the things I brought up was bus cameras. I live on a somewhat busy road, and my daughter takes the bus, and in a 2-week period, with the bus stopping, 3 cars have gone right past the bus. Had my daughter not been, at least the first time, looking both ways and actually waiting for traffic to stop. We teach our kids to say, hey, the bus is here, the arm's out, you can start going. I mean, people were ripping through. She would have actually been killed. So I brought it up to Randy, gave him a call. I learned that our old buses here at Wilson do not have cameras on them. The new buses do. There's a certain cost to putting cameras on that Randy's taking a look at, Mr. Williams. And there's also some potential ways of doing this at no cost to the district. So Mr. Williams is going back and doing some homework, and then we'll kind of reassess and come back to the board with, and administration to sort of see what we can do about this. But something's needs to get done. Randy was basically saying that this is not something that's just unique to my thing. This is a epidemic or pandemic all throughout the country, and someone's going to get killed. If we truly care about safety of kids, you know, when you're on the road, you don't drive drunk, you don't go past school buses. There's just a couple, I mean, people speed, but there's some sort of staples in society that you just don't do. So anything to help that cause, I'm 100% behind, and so I'm sure there's going to be more to come with that. That's my report. The next meeting is in December sometime, and I had December 12th on Monday. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Finance Committee, Mr. Negrini.
I have no report. Our next meeting is November 7th.
Thank you. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
As usual, not as much happening because of the election coming up. The Senate's in for 6 more days before they recess for the year. The House is in for 8 more days, I believe. And as you know, anything that's not voted on before November 30th goes back to committee, so it has to get represented to the whole new legislator when they get appointed. The U.S. Department of Education had a grant for about $1 billion that's going to be available for safety and security. It just was announced, I think, on the 14th. I believe, and I saw the Midwest distributions of the states, and I believe based on my mathematics, Pennsylvania should get around $35 million, plus or minus. So that should be forthcoming, hopefully soon. And that's something I thought was, worthwhile venture. Also, the Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education, sorry, not national, U.S. Department of Education has been inundated with requests, to expand, parents' rights and to hear different opinions, because right now the board's comprised mainly of appointees, and so they're going to, I'm not sure how they're going to do this, but they're going to appoint one parent to the oversight committee when they're going to be sitting on that committee, I guess hopefully in the near future, as well as one educator. So just want to pass that on. I found that quite interesting. I don't know how you're ever going to narrow that to one parent, but that should be interesting. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Human Resources, Mr. Hart.
I have no report.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening. I just wanted to let everybody know that the Wilson High School Junior ROTC will be hosting our 20th annual Berks County Veterans Appreciation Dinner Dance in the Wilson High School Gymnasium on Saturday, November 5th. Tickets can be purchased in the high school office or at any Berks County Boss Cubs department store or at the door on the day of the event. For those of you who have never been at the event, it's amazing, and we certainly encourage the community to come out as we honor our veterans at this wonderful event. And Mrs. Casper already talked about our school climate survey, but just as a reminder to our community, the PA Climate and Culture Survey is one part of a comprehensive program to identify, measure, and report on school conditions that foster and promote student academic success and achievement. So there is a survey that is designed specifically for our community to share their thoughts with us. This survey is completely anonymous and voluntary. We'll be collecting similar data from our staff, students in grades 3 and up, and parents or guardians. And to access and complete the community survey, you can visit the homepage of our website where you can find the link. And I will also post a reminder on social media so that people know that they can find the link on our homepage of our website. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Troutman. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
No report.
Thank you. Technology Committee, Mr. McCray.
Yes, we did meet earlier today on a number of topics. One thing that we're looking at later this year is the purchase of new servers for the district. With that, we're also looking at new offerings for data recovery in case of disaster or cyber attack, including some off-site options as well. Wilson has also signed a petition asking for cybersecurity costs to be included in E-rate funding moving forward, which is something that's not currently included in that program. We've also done an account audit of inactive emails, looking to deactivate any employee account across the district that hasn't been used in the past 12 months. This is also to reduce cyber attack vulnerability. And lastly, we are still waiting new wireless access points, which are on back order, but no known delivery date is done. The good news, however, is that all of our current access points are working fine, so we hopefully will be able to continue that until the new ones are delivered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Student outreach, Ms. Danny Radash.
Hello. The Pink Out game was a success, raising over $2,700 for Berks County Breast Cancer Services. I love seeing everyone dressed in pink to support the cause. And congratulations to Aiden Melagrana and Kate Melandra for winning Homecoming King and Queen. Congratulations to senior Amish Jindal for publishing his book, Global is Local, containing interviews with community leaders to demonstrate that many local businesses act as pieces of the global economy. This month, the 6th grade students at both West and Southern had their overnight trips at Camp Swatara. They hiked, searched for insects in the stream, and did many more fun and educational activities. High school students assisted on the trip as counselors, and I could tell you from being there that a good time was had by both the 6th grade students and the counselors. On a Friday, Minithon held a drive-in movie night. Attendees got to sip hot chocolate and watch Hocus Pocus from their cars. And on Wednesday, October 26th, Minithon will be hosting an event at Duncan's Corn Maze to kick off fall. Hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Mr. Ravish, we do have public participation on non-agenda items.
Rules, excuse me, rules of public participation for these meetings. Individuals attending these meetings are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but is instead an opportunity to offer comments on matters that are or may come before the board. In particular, personnel or student matters may not be commented on, even if the employee, parent, or student is the speaker, because of confidentiality laws. As it relates to questions, the superintendent may assign an administrator or may speak directly to the speaker after the meeting to attempt to answer any questions raised by the speaker. The board respectfully requests that you direct your comments to the board as a body, as it is the entire board that will need to consider the information in future voting. Clapping, calling out, ensuring it is not permitted, nor conversations in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board table at any time. Individuals may make their comments from the speaker's podium. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. I give the 1-minute warning. Any person making threats of violence may be removed from the meeting or may be cited by local police. These expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is on the district's website, embedded in board docs.
Thank you, Mr. Maravich. First, we have Micah Hollick on the band room renovation.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Micah Hollick, and I'm a freshman at Wilson High School. This year is my first year in the marching band, and I play the bass drum. On behalf of the Wilson music students, we greatly appreciate and support reopening the proposal for the band room and auditorium renovations. We would be happy to meet with the board at a later date to give more specific feedback of our needs. Thank you for your dedication to improving our school district.
Thank you, Micah. Next, we have Val Delp, Performing Arts Plans.
So I'm actually going to skip to my other topic because I thought that was agenda item, so I'll talk about that another time. So this is the book, Melissa, formerly published as George, which is included in the Reading Olympics program for the middle schools this year. I read this entire book over the weekend, and I admit there are themes in it that are good, like standing up for yourself, being a good friend, and acceptance of others. But there are also some I don't agree with, like hiding things from parents and unnecessary descriptions of private moments that may be inappropriate for an 11 to 14-year-old to read. I'm going to read a part in the book where the character George has revealed he is a girl named Melissa to his friend Kelly, and Kelly is giving George some of her clothes to wear. Just going to warn you, because there is a child in the audience, that this is somewhat sensitive content. So it says, she handed Melissa a pair of light pink underwear covered in tiny red hearts. They were small and light. You can have them, don't worry, they're clean. Are you sure? Melissa asked. Of course, I have too many pairs anyway. Melissa turned around and began to take off the purple skirt. You don't have to take it off. You can change under it. Skirts are awesome like that. Oh, right. Melissa took off her own underwear, stepped into Kelly's, and pulled it up under her skirt. Other than the coolness of the fabric on her skin, she could barely tell she was wearing anything at all. Why is there no parental guidance label on the list for this book? We put those labels on movies and TV shows, so why does no such thing exist for children's books? To me, it comes across as though controversial content is being snuck in, which further builds onto the mistrust that some have in public education. By not addressing this, you've assumed that every parent has the time to research and read every book on the list before their child does. How many parents will come to you angry after finding out that their child read that book when they would not have allowed it? Some will try to claim that we want to ban books. Even though I don't personally want my children to read this content, I believe parents should have the choice in the books their children read.
1 minute.
The problem is that children who participate in the program don't really have a choice if they want their team to do well in the competition. While none of you here are responsible for creating the program or picking the books, the district is responsible for keeping parents informed and for preserving a parent's right to make a choice on what content they believe is appropriate for their child to read. I leave you with 3 things that could have prevented the outrage of many parents. 1, a brief description of each book on the list. 2, a parental guidance label for any content you know could be controversial or viewed by some as inappropriate. And 3, an option to opt out of books without penalizing students in any way from a fair competition. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Cindy Rusnak, Reading Olympics.
Hello, my name is Cindy Rusnak. I'm a taxpayer in the district, and I have grandchildren that attend school in the district. The circumstances of the last couple of years have brought both productive and non-productive behaviors and discourse to the surface. I started watching these meetings online as a result, and then recently decided that if I was going to have an opinion, that I needed to put some work in to be more knowledgeable about how my money was being spent. This is only the second meeting I've attended in person, but it was brought to my attention that a book on the reading list for this Reading Olympics, it would be a non-agenda topic tonight. I didn't know exactly what would be said or how it would be said, but I did what I typically do, I researched it. I looked up summaries, reviews, different sources, recommendations by both adults and children, and then I ended up getting a hold of a copy of the book and reading it. George or Melissa, it goes by both names. Do I think it is the worst book a middle schooler could read? No. I find some of the things on TikTok and Facebook and TV commercials to be just as offensive, maybe even more so. Do I consider this to be a quality piece of children's literature? No. Far from it. In fact, this book will probably be remembered more for controversy than as an excellent book. I was a private school teacher and administrator for 38 years and had experience with Scholastic. That's the publisher of this book. They sell many what I call fad books, commercialized books, they talk about entertainers and performers and things like that. Scholastic makes big money off of what I call quantity reading, not quality. And maybe we need to look at exactly who sponsors this Reading Olympics. But back to this topic that I was originally coming up to talk about, I always told my staff where I worked that everyone's truth is their truth. I agree. Some people may have no objection to reading such things or letting their children read such things. I don't want to be a person that says ban this, don't let it, appear at all. But I agree. I think there should be some blurb written about each book. Maybe some content, like a movie rating, to say, yes, what is included in this book, and that parents have some avenue to opt out of these things. I think that this goes back to people having an open interest in what's going on, and that maybe you would avoid some problems by having more communication available to parents, and that parents have, their say in things as well. Club advisors might have to do a little more work, but when I read the website about the Reading Olympics, it does seem like they can, phase different people in and out of question rooms. So I think it would take a little work, but that they could do it. I just thank you for your time and would like to see more open dialogue and communication between parents.
Thank you for your comments. Next, Sherry Cook, also about the book George.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name's Sherry Cook. I've been a Wilson resident for over 22 years, and I currently have a daughter in 6th grade. She attends Wilson West. And I'd like to speak about this book called George. The book entitled George is about a 4th grade boy named George, and George identifies himself as a girl. And I don't believe this book should be on the list of approved reading Olympic books. This controversial topic of transgender youth has divided our country, and you hear about it on the news, you read it on the internet, and regardless of your personal beliefs, I believe the subject of your should be discussed in the home and not in the schools. Our schools should not be addressing such delicate matters. To ask a 9 to 12-year-old whether they're even what they want to be when they grow up. They don't even know what they want to be when they grow up, but we're going to be giving them books to read where they could be talking or thinking about altering their body is just mind-blowing to me. When an impressionable child hears from a teacher or a member of the faculty that they're endorsing a book or supporting a view, it can be confusing to a child, especially if the teacher's view differs from the parents or their family. So it's not just about a librarian trying to encourage a 6th grader to read a book. It goes deeper than that. I've seen firsthand how cruel children can be when, how cruel children can be to others who are different. As part of my profession, several months ago, I had to console the mother of a 12-year-old girl who identified as a boy. This little child was bullied so badly that eventually he took his life. And it kills me. It's one senseless death is one too many, and my heart breaks for the family, but although there's nothing I can do for the family, I believe censoring this book could help others. Many of you have probably not read this book. I'd like to tell you that I've been told it's approved for 3rd through 7th graders. My daughter's in 6th grade. I'd like to read a passage from you, and I ask that as you listen, if you could please consider whether you think it's appropriate for an 8 to 12-year-old. George stopped. It was such a short question, but she couldn't make her mouth form the words. Mom, what if I'm a girl? George had seen on an interview on television a few months ago with a beautiful woman named Tina. She had golden brown skin, thick hair, with blonde highlights and long sparkling fingernails. The interviewer said that Tina had been born a boy, then asked her whether she'd had the surgery. The woman replied that she was a transgender woman and that what she had between her legs was nobody's business but hers and her boyfriend's. So George knew it could be done. A boy could become a girl. She had since read on the internet that you could take girl hormones that could change your body, and you could get a bunch of different surgeries if you wanted them and had the money. This was called transitioning.
Please wrap up.
It goes on and on, but my point is, I believe, in summary, I'm asking that you please consider removing this book from the Reading Olympics. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. R.J. Hansen, Mental Health.
Good evening, everyone. We've been talking a lot about safety and security, and I'd like to address how our students' mental health falls under this umbrella as it relates to some of the other comments that have been made tonight. As a mental health, behavioral health professional and parent of 2 teens, this is always on my mind. I frequently think of our most vulnerable populations and if they're able to access the services needed and if they feel safe asking for that help. This week, I also have been participating in some conversations surrounding this children's book about a transgender girl. I just finished reading the book in question. I have to say, in my career, I've worked with a lot of LGBT youth, quite a bit in the past 10 years, and this book is a really accurate depiction of what those young people go through on a daily basis, both good and bad. My 8th grader has told me while at school, they have heard trans and gender nonconforming students be called he, she, it, and heard those same students be asked what's in their pants. Not to mention various slurs I'm not comfortable repeating in public. The impact that this kind of harassment has on someone's mental health and in their education is very serious. I'm not here to debate the appropriateness of the content of this book, because it's not for me to decide. What I will say is that diversity in literature is important because representation matters and can be life-saving for some students. Also, reading about differing experiences teaches us empathy, which ultimately improves our school environment. But all of this is meaningless if there aren't supports in place that are easy and safe to access for some of our most vulnerable students. According to the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, 9 out of 10 LGBT students are harassed. Almost 1/3 miss school because they feel unsafe there. Our LGBT students are at higher risk for depression, anxiety, self-harm, and suicide. I know that our staff do their very best to make our students feel safe and cared for and validated, but I have to ask, are we doing enough to support them and make them feel safe in their schools so they can be in their best frame of mind to learn? Thank you very much.
Reading Olympics.
I feel like making a Cowboys joke to cut the tension, but Officer Johnson has suffered enough with those, I'm sure, so. So the Reading Olympics, great program. Our oldest loves it. It's fun to watch the kids compete, and he was even on the winning team last year, and a lot of you in this room were there to support the kids, and I thought that was great. But sadly, you're passing the buck and missing the point when it comes to parental concerns with the book George, a book that is sexually explicit and renders gender confusion. Was it Wilson? Was it the BCIU? Was it the state? Or the ALA that added this book to the Reading Olympics list? We still don't know. When contacted by concerned parents, all Wilson gave us was the rules of the program, and then maybe our kid doesn't have to read that book. I didn't care much for that answer. But if they're going to have questions on the book, George, in the Reading Olympics, how can the kids get a top score? Someone put this pervasively vulgar, educationally unsuitable book on a required reading list, and there's no accountability. You preach transparency, but again, we parents get the opposite. The door has been opened to allow children, and let me say that word again, children, access to pornographic material. Great, what's next? Field trips to R-rated movies? I can't wait. All my husband and I want is for our kids to receive a quality education without them being exposed to inappropriate, explicit sexual content. Introducing books that facilitate gender confusion are completely inappropriate for middle school children. Kids are not capable of processing this issue in a healthy way. Innocence, once lost, can never be regained. Please work with the BCIU to provide a list of more suitable, non-divisive books. And on another note, the bus cameras, that's a great idea because it's an issue on our road too. I've seen it too many times. Thank you.
That's the end of our public participation on non-agenda items. I think it might be helpful if we had a discussion or an explanation of the process for Reading Olympics, because so I have been a judge for multiple years, both at the elementary level and the middle school level, where we traveled to different school districts in the county. And I just recently sent my own child's foreman for the Reading Olympics. So while I am very well versed in how the program works, I understand that not everyone may be as well versed. So Dr. Trickett, would you mind explaining the process, how the list is created, and what the rules are for our district and students once involved in the program?
Yeah, you bet. And I just want to preface it by saying, as most of you know, I also have children in this school district, 2 in the high school and 1 in the middle school. All of my kids have also participated in the Reading Olympics. So from a parent perspective, I experienced it. So this information, the concerns came to my desk early last week through some phone calls to our leadership team, as well as some direct emails to me. So I took the time to make sure I had my facts in line, wanted to make sure I understood the concerns and how our district is ultimately responsible for either the generation, distribution, and so forth of this list. So we worked as a team, reached out to a variety of different groups here locally to determine where these lists come from. And again, I'm just presenting you with the facts as I understand them. This is a statewide competition. It's a competition that is held all across the Commonwealth and has been for quite some time. There are regions that are established. The region that we participate with includes some other counties from the southeastern side of the state. Those lists, again, go from the state down to this regional level. The library group as well is part of this list, and essentially what they do is they funnel those lists down, trying to get them to a manageable number of books for our kiddos to realistically read and compete in. It's clear in my communications back to the parents that reached out to me that, again, it's a competition, it's an optional competition. Our kiddos assemble teams, they discuss the list of books, and essentially they figure out who's going to tackle each book. Sure, our kids are competitive. I'm competitive as well, and I can appreciate that some of our kids feel that they need to read them all. Needing to is different than being told that they must. So I just want to make sure that I point that out. We also then worked with our local IU, as was mentioned tonight. The BCIU helps cover the logistics of this competition. They don't create the book list, but they help govern the way that it's administered. So we're working in conversation with them. We've had conversations even around a variety of titles that, quite frankly, for people in this room, might be traumatic if you read them. There's titles that might include trauma. There's titles that might include, unfortunately, horrible acts that occur in society, like murder. Those are traumatic, depending on the reader and their lived experiences. So we're continuing that dialogue with the IU to make sure that we're aware of that. So I just wanted you to know the takeaways are that the lists are not created from the Wilson School District. They are a statewide committee that works throughout this region to assemble these book lists. They're sent to us. We don't even have the questions to the competition at this time. They'll keep those questions and release them closer to the time that the competition occurs. The last thing I would want to mention is a couple folks brought up the point of, advocating for the rights of parents. 100% support that. Parents ultimately need to be a part of their child's learning process and all the experiences that they have. There is a list of the books on the West website. There is a list of every single book with a blurb, with a description, so that is something that exists out there, for our parents to consider as we are entering the competition season.
Thank you, Dr. Turkett. I think 2 points that you just brought up, I would like to kind of hone in on from a personal level. So in order for my child to participate, they participated last year and participating again at the elementary level, so it's a different list of books than what is being discussed tonight. I had to sign a permission slip. Like many things in our district, I had to sign a permission slip. So I didn't just have a pile of papers on my counter and just randomly sign all of them. The permission slip has a list of the optional books from which my child may pick to read. Last year, their team had, I think, maybe 10 kids on their team. It was very popular at their elementary school. So for example, let's say the 12 of us sitting at this table were a team in Reading the Olympics. There are 24 books on the middle school list. So each of us would have to pick 2 books off the list, probably. I mean, unless Mr. Schneider is a real go-getter and wants to do like 10, and then we're all like, thanks, Mr. Schneider, for doing all the work. But we should at least, to do our part, probably pick 2. The chances are that out of the 12 of us, somebody is going to be comfortable picking George as a book. I know that my child would be comfortable reading that book, and they're in elementary school still. It's based on the individual student and their maturity level. My other child would not, they're not there yet. They wouldn't feel comfortable, they wouldn't understand the topic, but you have to base it off of your personal family decisions, the maturity of the student, maybe the things that they have read previously that would be on level or on topic, and make a personal decision and a family decision. The first thing we did before I signed that permission slip was I Googled every single book. And I know that there were at least 5 on the list that would not strike the interest of my child. I wouldn't discourage them from it, but I know they're probably not going to pick those once they know what the books are about. So as a parent, I made the decision to have a discussion with my child about the topics on the books, and they, from there, decided which books they're going to pick to work with their team. And as a previous judge and facilitator for the Reading Olympics, there are plenty of questions. So if there's 24 books on this list, elementary school, I think, has about 15, because it's, based on the level. Each round, there are 3 rounds to the competition. Sometimes they travel for different rooms to have different judges. Each round, we probably got to maybe 1 question per book. So out of the whole competition, if you have 24 books on this list, your group is going to have probably about 3 questions on this quote-unquote controversial book. So it's absolutely, it's optional. A parent definitely gets to choose if their child is going to read it or not, if they're going to participate in the event or not. And 1 student or 2 students in that group not reading that one particular book in no way, shape, or form is going to harm the scores for their team. I would like to, I went over the middle school list because I've already seen the elementary school list and understand their books. So I went through the middle school list and wrote down some of the topics that were in these books. So the first one was about plants taking over the earth and killing a lot of people. There are topics about the Holocaust, slavery, death and grief. The one book is called Doll Bones, which, according to an online description, is creepy and spooky, hence the name Doll Bones. I'm not really sure what that one would be about, but definitely has an interesting title. In one book, a father is murdered. In one book, a student is interested in exploring their gender identity. In one book, a father is in prison. In one book, a girl is born and living in Saudi Arabia, which, based on the description, comes with a whole list of challenges for that girl. Another book, a girl is born without arms. A 12-year-old boy is put on house arrest after stealing a wallet. And the reason that he stole the wallet is because his brother from birth has had very expensive medical bills, and the father abandoned the family. There's a book about, in Little Rock, I want to say like the 50s, 2 best friends who are in a school that is being closed down because the school and state and local government oppose integrating the schools. There's a book about sexual consent. A book about children sneaking out on adventures, because I know historically some people are concerned about themes, not just topics, but themes in books when children are not telling their parents the truth or they're running away and sneaking out. There's the one book, I highly recommend this to everyone because we've had this a couple times in our competitions, Refugee. It intertwines it's really good. It intertwines 3 stories from 3 different time periods of 3 different refugees. 1938 Berlin, 1994 Cuba, and 2015 Syria. And all of the circumstances for all of their kids and family are clearly dire based on those actual events. There's a theme of grief, a government's violent, well, this one is called Undefeated. It's a Jim Thorpe story about the Carlisle Indian School. And it's about the government's violent persecution of Native Americans and the school that's designed to erase Indian culture. Another one is about immigration, just an immigration story called Unsettled. There's a theme of bullying. There's a theme of a wilderness camp for children that are troubled. And the last book on the list, A Wrinkle in Time, has historically been, for a multitude of reasons, on banned book lists. So I think it's interesting that out of the themes of the 24 books, that just one stood out. So if that one is not comfortable for you and your family, then your child doesn't have to read it. But there may be other themes, like Dr. Trigga said, that depending on what your family situation is or what your child's life experience is, a different book may stick out that wouldn't be appropriate for them. So I would like to open up to the board for discussion.
Well,
Mr. Martin?
First of all, what you just read, I wouldn't let my son or daughter read any of those. They're so depressing. Wasn't there a book in there that was enlightening and talking about some of them as a paraplegic that made the Olympics? Why is it all negative? It's all special interest groups in that list. Where's their happiness? That's what's wrong with that. So anyway, that's not what I wanted to talk about, but I couldn't believe that list. I'm just dumbfounded by that list. But anyway, getting back to this book, I'm sure all of us had received emails of one sort or another, most of them against it, only had one for it. So that doesn't mean it's mathematically, statistically important. But the thing is that one of the persons told me that You have to blame the board for all this. Okay, so the principal didn't know who authorized this book, so they say it's the board's responsibility. Well, we don't review all the books. I don't review any of those books. It's a separate entity. However, the one point she did make to me was that the superintendent is the president of this corporation. If this was a corporation, he would be held responsible for that book. So we have to be careful when we say, we didn't know about this or we didn't know about that. It's just like anything else. If you want to act like a corporation, then the CFO, I'm not the CFO, sorry, the president or chairman of the board is responsible for everything that goes in with the corporation. So passing that buck around didn't suit me well, and I'm going to leave it go down. I'm not going to get into the book tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. And I would just like to point out that while those are the themes of the book, that the story itself, in most cases, because I obviously haven't read all 24 of these books, the end result is almost definitely inspiring and at least entertaining for the one where the plants take over the earth. I'm not sure if that's going to be a happy ending. I would hope so, but my feeling is that this list went through a multiple level groups of librarians who are experts in their fields and narrowed it down as the list went through the different levels. So they're not, while the themes like that stuck out do seem kind of heavy, that's what a lot of kids are going through. And that's why I said that there may be topics on this list that students aren't comfortable having nothing to do with gender identity, having to do with fathers in prison, or people in their family being murdered, or financial situations where they feel like they want to help, like the house arrest, or they feel compelled to help their family and may not make the best decisions, like the student in that book stole a wallet because they felt like helpless in the situation. So that's just my take. I'm sorry. I promise I won't comment
President
after
Cocker,
everyone.
do you
Yes,
mind
Dr. Trickett.
if I just make one comment? Mr. Martin, I take the work that we do here very seriously, and again, I just want to assure the community and our team that we dedicated energy and time and research to digging into this. We responded to the parents' concerns in a timely manner. If I couldn't get back to them within a few hours, I said, I will get back to you as soon as I can, and within 24 hours I did. If there are people that are reaching out to you who are dissatisfied with their perception of me personally passing the buck, I encourage you and all of our board members to have them meet with me. I'm exceptionally accessible. I am available to meet. Mrs. Burkholder is over here. All they need to do is shoot them an email. I met with a variety of parents, both for and against this book. A total of 9 people reached out to me. So I just, again, want to reiterate, if that is the feeling that you have or others have that I'm passing the buck, I want to make sure that I have the opportunity to encourage them to reach out to me directly.
Let me clarify what I said, because once again, words get twisted. Sometimes the meetings are understood. What I'm saying is, what they convey to me is not passing the buck. I didn't say they were passing the buck, but they're saying, you are accountable for whatever goes on in this school. So when something does not go correctly, it's your responsibility to fix it. It's like, closing the barn door and after the horse is out. That doesn't do any good. I know you're very conscientious in getting back to the parents. I applaud you for that. It's just that situations where nobody knows what was going on concerns me. Because the principal didn't know it. They said the board approved it. Well, obviously the board doesn't know anything about this either until a couple of days ago or a week ago, whenever it was. So I wasn't implying anything I said. I'm just saying that as just like any chairman of the board, any president of a company, you were held, regardless if you know it or not know it, you're just accountable. It rolls up to you. That's all they were trying. So I'm leave it go at that.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other comments from the board? Dr. Kennedy?
First, I'd like to ask Dr. Trickett about the breakdown of the letters and the emails. From what I understand, there were 9 that reached out. 2 were 4. Of the 7, how many of those were actually parents in the district?
Yeah, so thank you. 3 of those folks never reached out to me directly. 6 folks in total reached out to me. So of the folks that I spoke to, I would say half of those folks had kids in these middle-level grades.
I would also, before I start my official comments, like to say that Alan Gratz, the author of Refugee, is coming to speak at Kutztown University Children's Literature Conference in the spring, and I'm super excited about that. I know our sixth grade students read Prisoner B in both West and in Southern, and I have a friend that used to teach at Southern that I know would have been first in line for that conference. So it's open to the public, and it's a wonderful book, and he has a lot of really wonderful middle-level books. And I've been begging the chair of this committee to ask him for years, so I'm super excited. It's our 25th anniversary. So I want to reiterate that none of this was required. Reading Olympics is not required. You're not required to all read all the books on the book list. You will not be penalized if you are one of 5, 6, 7, 10 kids in your group that you don't know the answer. And having been at the Reading Olympics many, many times before, the most upsetting thing is when you're like an expert on a book and they don't ask any questions about that book. That has happened so many times, it makes me insane. I don't even know where to start with this. So many of the speakers and some of what I've seen on social media, despite certain people trying to block it from certain people to see, is that there's a lot of advocates for parent choice out there. And I completely understand that. But you get to choose for your child. You don't get to choose for my child. I choose for my child. And by taking this off the list or putting a warning label on it, you're making a choice for my child. And that goes both ways. I don't make the choice for your child, you don't make the choice for my child. Our teachers, we've said this many times, their plates are full. They cannot read. We have extensive classroom libraries. They cannot read every book in every library in the Wilson School District. I also would not presume to know what would make a parent upset or not. My idea of what is developmentally appropriate, like Steph said, is very different for even within my 4 children. I'm not going to presume I know everything about what everything is going to make everyone upset. And I don't think our teachers should have to do that. Our teachers and our librarians are experts in children's literature. Our teachers are experts in what is developmentally appropriate for our students. The librarians from the Pennsylvania Library Association, their entire career is based on choosing high-quality children's literature. My job, my department that I teach in the college is elementary, middle level, and library science. We're all in one group. We're all experts together. I spoke to many of my colleagues, and they all assured me that those serving on the Pennsylvania Library Association are indeed experts in their field. Not just anybody can stand up and be a librarian. You have to have extensive education. What I worry about the most is this idea, is that teachers and librarians should be putting warning labels on books. It makes me think about growing up in the 90s and seeing Tipper Gore talk to Congress. And then seeing, I can't remember his name, the one from
Dee Snider.
Dee Snider come up from Twisted Sister and totally blow the entire Congress away with how intelligently he spoke. And what happened to all of the gangster rap and all of the heavy metal out there? Well, guess what? You stuck a warning label on it and it flew off the shelves. What worries me, though, is that the most insidious form of censorship isn't even these open, outright times that you try and censor or ban books. That's not even the worst. The worst is when we put a little bug in a teacher's ear or in a librarian's ear that maybe I shouldn't get this book, even though I think it's a quality book, even though I think it might touch the lives of some students, maybe I ought not put this on my shelf because it might make a parent angry. And that, for me, is the most insidious form of censorship, because there could be books that could change the lives of a student. For every parent that feels uncomfortable reading about underwear, and I do have a really great picture book on underwear, if you want to see that one. For every parent that's upset about that, there is a child who needs to see themselves represented in a book. And just sometimes knowing that you're not alone and you're not weird or you're not the only one could be life-saving. It's been proven over and over in studies that reading makes you a more empathetic person. Seeing the world through other people's eyes makes you more empathetic. And you can't make transgender kids disappear by removing a book. It's not a controversial topic. These are children in our schools, not controversies. Children need to see themselves represented in books. One of my favorite experts on children's literature makes the comparison of windows and mirrors. We need to have an equal, in our libraries of our schools, we need to have equal windows and mirrors. We need to have mirrors so that kids can see themselves in a book. But we also have to have windows that students can go and walk, actually now they call them sliding glass doors, so children can walk into another person's life and experience that life. A book is not going to make you gay. I have read enough fitness books and weight loss books. I am still chunky. If a book was going to make me skinny, I'd be the thinnest person in the world right now. We read The Hungry Caterpillar to millions of kindergartners every year. None of them have turned into butterflies. But perhaps eating our way through Sunday might be part of my problem. But books don't make you anything. They give you ideas, they give you subjects, they give you topics, they give you discussion points. But we're not indoctrinating students by reading them a book or by putting a book on a book list. That's just not, it's not a thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Other comments?
I have a few comments. Transgender is a big issue. It's a big issue at Wilson. I think personally, when I see a parent with a 4-year-old dressing him as a girl and as a boy, that's appropriate. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that parent should be punished. How does that 4-year-old know what they want to be? But the mom wants that child to be that individual. We've had that at Wilson. So it is an issue. So you can't let this stuff just roll off. To me, that's not acceptable, but society permits it. Is that right? A 4-year-old being changed into, a different sex when I don't even think they can comprehend it yet, but we allow it. So, that is an issue. Now, I do have a big issue with that. If they're 14, 15, I don't care what they do. But putting something in front of a person that doesn't even know what the world is and saying, it's okay, we're going to change you because a parent has a problem, maybe it's not the child, maybe it's the parent. So it is an issue. I don't care what anybody says. That's an issue. It's an issue for me. I would not want to, well, you wouldn't want to be in the same street with me if I seen that occurring, but anyway, that's another story. We have to take a look at, I understand what you said, Amy, everything you said, books don't change person, and I get that. But why do we have ratings on movies? Why do we have ratings on games? Why do we have ratings on everything else? It's okay to have a rating. A parent should have that right to know what that book's about. I left my cell phone out in the car. I was going to read some more stuff, but I guess for sake of time, we'll leave that go. But I just, I hear where you're coming from. Librarians are great. But you got to remember, most people in education, not all, most of them tend to lean toward the left side of the spectrum, where anything can go anytime, any place. And I get that. That's their job. The issue is, we got to be fair in everything we approach. I'm sure there's certain books that if they were put in there, I'm not even going to make up, I was going to make something up, but that wouldn't be right. As long as it's balanced, and I don't think anybody said anything about banning books. And I know you and I had a heated discussion earlier in the pre-board meeting about the same topic. Nobody wants to ban books. And the question is, and I'm still coming back, is it age appropriateness of such books? Not banning the books, but age appropriateness. So while we can, stick our head in the ground saying transgender is not an issue, it shouldn't be an issue, but parents make it an issue, and I'm going to leave it go at that.
So I would like to kind of, not a rebuttal, but maybe educate a little bit on that issue. So to say that students who are transgender is not an issue, I agree with you. It's definitely an issue. It's a mental health issue. And not in the way that I think probably we would disagree on it. Students who are in the LGBTQ community are at much higher risk for suicide. Like 4 times the amount of suicides as students that are not in the LGBT community. And we're not talking about a 4-year-old reading this book, because 4-year-olds, most of them can't read. We're not talking about our preschool teachers reading this book to 4-year-olds. We're talking about 12 to 14-year-olds. I taught middle school for 10 years. I'm telling you right now, if you think that a 10 to 14-year-old, if your child is different, by all means, don't have them read this. But if you think that a 10 to 14-year-old can't handle the material in this book, especially in today's age, I strongly encourage you to talk to a 12 to 14-year-old. Because I think your understanding of what they know, I don't know a single 12 to 14-year-old doesn't have a cell phone. So if there's a topic that the parents may not want them to understand or may try to shelter them from, all they have to do is look it up on their cell phone. And if your child doesn't have a cell phone, then I don't know how you're doing it, because we have a 5th grader that is incessantly trying to get me to give them a cell phone, and it's very hard to say no. So it's out there. I think the issue is when we think that keeping a book like this away from students is going to not make them gay or lesbian or queer or transgender. That's where the problem is. That by simply removing that book off the list, phew, we saved a couple kids from becoming transgender. That's not how that works. And I have been thinking about an appropriate way to share this story, knowing that this topic was coming up. When I was at Wilson, I'm not going to put a year on it, not to age myself, but also to keep the identity of the individual possibly protected. There was a student that was a year or 2 younger than me, that was, and we didn't have the words for it back then, but gender neutral, somewhere that was in between enough that people noticed, right? And this was a while ago. So it wasn't as, people weren't open about it. We didn't have the term to say transgender or gender neutral. We just didn't have it, or non-binary. So this student was bullied mercilessly. Not because we had books that had the topic on it, not because there were celebrities that, I don't think RuPaul was even a thing back then, that's aging myself. It wasn't in our culture. This student was transgender or non-binary because that's how they were born. And the problem is, we were bullied, not me personally, but this student was bullied mercilessly to the point where a couple people commented on, people were asked what's in their pants or what's in between their legs. A male student in my grade physically assaulted this student to check what was in between their legs. This student was physically assaulted because somebody had to know. A, it wasn't their business, but B, nobody was telling us what was going on. So of course that student was weird and other and I don't know how much support they had from school because they were a couple years younger than me, so I didn't, have that information. But if that was happening then, and we think now that by keeping books like this out of the hands of students, that it's going to change something about that. Not sharing information with students is putting those students at more risk. So if we're going to talk about LGBTQ issues, absolutely. If we're going to talk about an optional book on a list that parents have the choice to pick if they want their child to read it or not, then let's focus on that. Because if you want to have a full-on discussion about mental health and LGBTQ issues, I think that's a different topic.
Okay, it's getting late.
Are there any other comments?
I do want to say, just really quickly, you reminded me so much of a Nacy quote. Now, they usually talk about very young children with this, but Many times, we overestimate students' academic ability, but we underestimate their cognitive and emotional ability. So we think they can sit and be quiet and do papers, and we think that too much, but we don't give them enough that they're able to developmentally have really deep conversations.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Mr. Schneider?
Yeah, just as a social studies teacher, Mike, if you look at historical photos, pretty much every 4-year-old in the past was wearing a dress, boy or girl. Also, high heels were invented for men.
No, wait a minute. There's a difference, Bob. Come on now. When you see a boy who's dressed like a girl, high heels, makeup on, 4 years old, I don't want to hear about, that is just so far off the wall, that comment.
I'm just giving you the historical perspective.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Case?
I just want to thank Mr. Martin for stating the obvious, that the buck does stop at the superintendent, and I want to thank Dr. Trickett and your team for basically navigating today's challenges with public education. It's not an easy job. Thank you for being so open and accessible to the community and the students and parents of the community. So you are the best fit for Wilson School District, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Case.
I just also wanted to say to all the teachers and the librarians, I hope this discussion of controversy doesn't, as Dr. Kennedy mentioned, doesn't make you feel less willing to bring forth diversity in the content that our students are learning in the schools, and that challenge them emotionally and academically. And I hate that we end up talking about these youngsters as if they're walking around like ticking time bombs and, just constantly being harassed. They are people, and they are walking within the walls of our schools, and they enjoy life, they have relationships with people, they enjoy their teachers and the staff in our buildings. I think it's really important to not look at them as though, we have to somehow figure them out or that there's some oddity. I think it's important to integrate, and this is one tool, a book. This is one tool to make our schools more inclusive and to make sure that all of our students see themselves represented in their education. We should be celebrating all of our students, not walking on eggshells and talking about them in a way in which, they're constantly a threat to themselves. This is really important to keep the well-being of our students intact. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. Any other comments? Okay, looking for motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Schneider, thank you. Meeting adjourned.